Good evening, class. I wanted to just touch base with you after a brief meeting with you during the orientation session, the library orientation session. I am hoping that you have gained access already to that video and gotten the tips from Professor Eaton, his help, the librarians, and how they can help you conduct your research, right? But I just wanted to go over some of what is due right now and some of what you should be working on, right? I think number one is your capstone or the final research project, right? I have made a few things available to you. Last week, I gave you these two worksheets, right, that helped you understand how to structure your research paper. Also, these two handouts that gave you an idea of how to find a topic and what the research really entailed, right? I've uploaded today the peer review form. I think 10% of your final grade will come from giving peer reviews to people within your groups, right? So if you give a great peer review, that's worth 5 points. If you give 2 great peer reviews, that's worth 10 points of your final grade for this assignment, which is the highest stakes in the class, right? The final one. Using the peer review form and filling it out and following it will ensure that you get all your points, right? What will also ensure that you get all your points is posting your drafts before my eyes see them under file exchange so that your group mates can read, give you feedback, and then you can also read theirs and give them feedback, right? One more, I uploaded a couple of things. According to the schedule, you should be reading Margaret Atwood's poem. Margaret Atwood is a Canadian author, the one who wrote, well, there's a Netflix series. Is it Netflix or is it, might be Hulu? The Handmaid's Tale, right? Futuristic, like novel that takes place in somewhere in the near future, but I think it was written in the 1980s. But imagining America, you know, in an ultra conservative setting. Anyways, the poem has nothing to do with that. It's got, well, I wonder what you think the poem has to do with this class and why I chose to place it there. Okay, so I wanted to spend the last 3 minutes because I made sure that this would be only 6 or 7 minutes. I want you to read this last handout that gives you tips on the structure of a research paper, right? So if you would click here, please, it'll direct you to download it. And then, well, I'm not going to download it because I've downloaded it already and it's right here and you have access to my screen so you can see it. Okay, this last handout focuses on the body of the essay, right? So use these worksheets as a form to warm up, right? And what you write here may or may not be used for the research paper, but it will give you better quality writing. Essentially, that's the only tip I wanted to give you about this worksheet. Going back to course content all the way towards the end, I've also uploaded this research paper tips on structure. And when you click on that, I'm going to open it, research paper tips. All right. So I think you're looking at it right now. So please read it, but I'll give you a general idea of what it entails and also try to give you a hands-on preparation for writing your paper, right? The research paper is nothing but an essay, right? It's still an essay and it follows the format of an essay, the general format of having an introduction, which contains a hook through which you try to get your reader's attention, right? So it's a general statement, not a fact. It is a fact, I'm sorry. It's not opinionated, right? Then you start progressively getting towards your opinion about the theme or topic of your research. as an essay, it still requires a thesis statement. So that means you still have to make a point, an opinionated point, like your own unique views on the research itself, not on the topic, right? You have the whole paper to discuss the topic, but you should end the introduction of your paper with a point about your research, right? And then I ask you these questions if you follow this, right? These steps. Let's take a look at the introduction, at what you could do with the introduction. I'm not going to change the document that you will see. I'll just change this one here, right? Why don't you do this? Why don't you go ahead and brainstorm with me? State the topic of your research. You have done this before, right? So that Professor Eaton could help you. But why don't you complete the sentence again, right? I am interested in researching the consequences of blah, 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 the types of blah, 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 right? My research will focus on, right? Write out the topic of your research, okay? Try it a couple of times, come up with a sentence. Then now I'm going to help you with the, so this was for the topic, right? The theme or topic of your research, right? Very good. You can try those sentences. Now, I'm going to ask you to think about the hook for your introduction, right? Answer these questions and try to answer all of them, and then you may use them, you may not use them for your hook, right? Think about it this way. What is the overarching area of knowledge of your research topic, right? What does it have to do with? Is it best studied, right? Is it best explained, discussed by psychology? Is it best understood by anthropology? Is it best understood by, I don't know, philosophy, sociology, right? And if this is too difficult for you, right? Like if you don't understand yet, if you don't have that answer, right? Philosophy, what did I say? Sociology. Okay, try to write it in a sentence, right? Just what the area of knowledge, the overarching science that studies it, right? If that is too difficult, if social science is too difficult for you to think of a correlation to, you can maybe go with what concept does it relate to the most, right? So write the answer to this question now. I'll give you fast forward. I'll give you 10 seconds, but you can do it and you can pause me and try it again. Okay. Another question for you to answer is, you've already identified like which area of knowledge covers it or what concept it deals with, right? Ideally, right, if you were to find a news article, I don't require one for this class, you need a scientific journal article, but if you were to find, right, a news article about this topic, what would the news look like? And I'm thinking headlines here, right? Go ahead and maybe try to write that headline of what, if this were an article, that a news article, right, that you could read about this, what would the headline say, okay? I'm still brainstorming about this, right? And this will start transitioning towards a thesis statement, but I'm going to ask you a question. Why should this research concern me or anyone else, right? Why does not the topic now, the research, right? Why does the research matter to you, anyone, humanity in general? Why should people bother reading this? What is the contribution of your research? How can it change the world? How can it have a positive impact? Who can it inspire, right? So why does your research matter? Okay, so this is a relevance question. Answer that in one sentence as well. You see, I'm just telling you to do an exercise of just writing. This is like brainstorming, and I'm helping you with that. Once you have those answers, you will be a lot closer, right, to start writing an introduction, which starts with a general statement, the hook, like a fact, a statistic, or a general statement. For example, right, if you answer this question, right, many have pondered on the importance of, you can say just the area of, or the concept of the topic that you are going to research. So that's a statement, right? I didn't get specific. Or if you were trying to answer about the relevance, right? You would progressively explain why you decided to research this, right, in one or two sentences, so that you can then arrive at your thesis statement, so that you can then make a strong statement about not the topic anymore, but about your research. Why does your research matter, right? Or why should people bother reading it? Another option, and I cover that further now, right? What have you gained from this? What have you learned, right? Did you have previous assumptions, right? Were they confirmed? Were they disconfirmed? Those are both valid, okay? Both would be interesting, would make for interesting reads, right? I think the best way is to judge or evaluate the results of the research that you conducted, right? And this makes for a great thesis statement. Well, then you would move on to the body of the research, right? Maybe you want to do something similar to the oral history, in which you give a little bit of background on your knowledge about this. This will structure the paper to make it look and read as though it's a real paper, like it'll show the journey that you went through from not knowing anything about this, or knowing some, having some assumptions, some previous knowledge, to, well, I have grown from this, professor. I have done some research and I've learned A, B, and C, right? So where are you coming from, right? So then you would go on, right? You would probably discuss, maybe even in another paragraph, I would suggest, did you choose sociology, psychology, or organic chemistry to understand this topic? Why did you choose it? How can it better analyze your topic, right? Did you consult books, or did you go to peer review articles, right? So this is a little bit about the methods of your research, right? Obviously, if you're conducting some practical research and you decided to do a survey, right? Like in some of the articles that we read in class, you decided to interview 100 people or 32 people, that's a minimum, to draw conclusions from this, then you would explain that in that paragraph, right? So now the context has been set. The reader has a great understanding by now of what you are researching, where it sits in relationship to what other people have investigated, for example. Now you're ready to start reporting on what you have learned, right? Did you learn something from this? Go ahead and state it in a concise sentence, right? What did the research, what has it taught you, right? Then you go back to that quote sandwich and the summary and response, right? You start responding to the articles that you read. And I'm not interested in a summarization of the articles, right? The quotes are tiny. The most important thing is what you learned, why this matters.